The cargo ship Distant Horizon dropped out of hyperspace above the green and silver world of Keth 7. Captain Daniel Harris stood on the bridge watching the planet grow larger through the main viewport. His crew had been traveling for 3 weeks straight, carrying medical supplies that the Valorian colony desperately needed. They had pushed their engines to the breaking point to arrive as fast as possible. Laura Bishop, his first officer, walked up beside him with a datapad in her hand. Her face showed the exhaustion they all felt. "Message from the colony," she said. "They are not happy." Daniel took the datapad and read the message. The Valorians were complaining that the shipment was 3 hours late. They demanded to know why humans could not follow simple schedules. They threatened to file a formal complaint with the Galactic Concord. The message did not mention that Valorian docking protocols had delayed the ship for 6 hours. It did not mention that the Distant Horizon had cut its travel time in half by skipping safety stops. It did not mention that the human crew had worked double shifts to make this delivery possible. Daniel handed the datapad back to Laura. "Begin unloading procedures," he said quietly. "Let us just get this done." This was life for humanity in the Galactic Concord. For 300 years, humans had served as the workers, the fixers, the ones who did the jobs no other species wanted to do. They maintained the great space stations that the Torvak had built, but could not repair. They healed the sick on worlds where diseases were too dangerous for other doctors to visit. They grew food on harsh colony planets where the soil fought against every seed. They mediated disputes between species that had been killing each other for thousands of years, and in return, humanity received nothing but contempt. Far across the galaxy, on Torvak Station 12, a human engineer named Kevin Marshall was crawling through a maintenance tunnel so narrow that his shoulders scraped both walls. Somewhere ahead of him, a critical power conduit had failed. If he did not fix it within the hour, the station's life support would shut down. 50,000 Torvak lives depended on him. Kevin reached the damaged section and began his repairs. His hands moved quickly, connecting wires and replacing components. He had done this kind of work so many times that his body moved automatically. As he worked, he heard voices from the corridor above. "To Torvak we're talking. Humans are slow today," one said. "Perhaps we should find better workers." "There are no better workers," the other replied. "That is the problem. We are stuck with these primitives until we can train our own people." Kevin finished his repairs in silence. He did not bother telling anyone that he had just saved their station. He simply moved on to the next crisis, as he always did, on Earth, in the headquarters of the United Human Authority. Admiral Patricia Coleman sat in her office reviewing reports. The walls around her displayed holographic maps of human territories throughout the galaxy. Those territories were small, scattered, and poor. The best worlds had been claimed by other species, long before humanity reached the stars. Patricia was 73 years old. She had spent her entire life watching her species be treated as lesser beings. She had fought in wars where human soldiers died to protect alien worlds that would never thank them. She had negotiated trade deals where humans received pennies while other species took fortunes. She had smiled and nodded through endless insults because that was what survival required. But she was done surviving. It was time for something else. Her door opened, and Commander Nathan Cole entered. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been Patricia's advisor for 20 years, and in that time they had become something like family. "The latest numbers are in," Nathan said, sitting down across from her. "Human birth rates have dropped again. Suicide rates among off-world workers have increased by another 12%. Applications for colony transfers back to Earth have doubled in the past year." Patricia nodded slowly. She had expected this. Her people were breaking under the weight of constant mistreatment. An entire generation had grown up being told they were inferior, and they had started to believe it. "What about the other project?" she asked. Nathan glanced at the closed door, then lowered his voice. "The new frontier is ahead of schedule. 23 worlds are now fully terraformed. The shipyards have completed construction on the 5th Fleet. Population capacity is ready for full exodus whenever you give the order." Patricia allowed herself a small smile. For 50 years, in absolute secrecy, humanity had been building a new home. a place far beyond the borders of the galactic concord, where no other species had ever traveled. A place where humans could live free from alien contempt. Not yet, she said. We need more time, and I want them to understand what they are losing. On the Mendari homeworld, Dr. Samuel Grant was treating patients in a clinic that served over 10,000 people. He was the only doctor. He had been the only doctor for 20 years. Samuel had developed vaccines that saved millions of Mendari lives. He had trained himself in their unique biology, learning secrets that their own scientists had never uncovered. He had worked through plagues that should have killed him, surviving on luck and determination. Today, a young Mendari mother brought her sick child to his clinic. The child had a fever that could become deadly if not treated quickly. Samuel examined the little one carefully, then administered the proper medicine. She will be fine, he told the mother. Bring her back tomorrow so I can check on her progress. The mother took her child and left without a word of thanks. Samuel watched them go, then turned to the next patient in a line that stretched out the door and down the street. Later that evening, Samuel returned to the small apartment he shared with his wife Catherine. She was also a doctor, working at a different clinic across the city. They rarely saw each other because the work never ended. I submitted my resignation today, Samuel said as they ate dinner together. Catherine looked up at him with surprise. After all these years, what happened? Nothing happened. That is the problem. Samuel stared at his food. 20 years I have given them. 20 years of my life, my health, my youth, and they have never once said thank you. They have never once treated me as anything but a servant. I cannot do it anymore. Catherine reached across the table and took his hand. The authority reached out to me last month, she said. They are offering positions in the new frontier. Good positions at real hospitals where we would be treating our own people. Samuel squeezed her hand. Then let us go. Let us finally go home. All across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. Human workers were reaching their breaking point. The dream of the new frontier was spreading in whispers, in secret messages, in quiet hopes. Humanity had served the galaxy faithfully for 3 centuries. They had given everything and received nothing. Now, slowly, silently, they were preparing to leave, and the galaxy had no idea what it was about to lose. The withdrawal began so quietly that nobody noticed. On Torvac Station 12, Kevin Marshall packed his belongings into a single bag. 20 years of his life fit into something he could carry with one hand. He had arrived on this station as a young man full of hope, believing that hard work would earn him respect. He was leaving as someone who had learned a painful truth. His supervisor, a Torvac named Greth9, barely looked up when Kevin submitted his transfer request. Another human leaving, Greth9 muttered, "Fine, we will request a replacement." Kevin wanted to say something. He wanted to explain that he had kept this station running for 2 decades. He wanted to point out that he knew every system, every shortcut, every hidden problem that nobody else understood. He wanted to warn them that finding a replacement would not be as easy as they thought. Instead, he said nothing. He simply walked away. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers, and peacekeepers submitted their resignations one by one. Their alien supervisors approved the requests without concern. Humans were always replaceable. More would come, but more did not come. The United Human Authority had quietly stopped sending workers to alien worlds. New graduates were directed to positions in human space. Experienced workers were offered transfers to the new frontier, the pipeline that had fed human labor to the galaxy for 3 centuries was slowly being shut off. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos stood in the shuttle bay of the peacekeeping vessel Harmony, waiting for her transport to arrive. She had spent 15 years serving on joint missions with alien species, always under commanders who considered her inferior. She had followed orders she disagreed with, fought battles she did not believe in, and watched human soldiers die for causes that meant nothing to them. Her commanding officer, a Valorian named Kethtar, approached her as she waited. "I hear you are leaving us," he said. His voice carried the tone that Maria had learned to recognize as alien disappointment mixed with contempt. "Yes, sir," Maria replied. "I have been reassigned to Human Fleet Command." Human Fleet Command. Kethtar made a sound that passed for laughter among his species. "What fleet? You humans barely have enough ships to patrol your own territory." Maria said nothing. She knew something that Kethtar did not. The human fleet in Concord space was indeed small. But the fleet being built in the new frontier was already larger than anything the Valorians had ever said. Assembled. 500 warships, designed and constructed entirely by human engineers, crewed entirely by human officers. Her transport arrived, and Maria boarded without looking back in the new frontier. Admiral Victor Reyes watched the latest arrivals from his command post on the battleship Resolute. Thousands of humans were pouring into the new territories every day. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, farmers, teachers, the best and brightest of their species, finally free to build something for themselves. Victor had been one of the first to believe in the Exodus. 40 years ago, as a young officer, he had been recruited into the secret project by Admiral Coleman herself. He had spent his entire career working toward this moment. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral Lieutenant Commander Santos has arrived. She is requesting permission to come aboard." "Granted," Victor said. "Send her to the bridge." Minutes later, Maria Santos stepped onto the bridge of the Resolute. She stopped just inside the door, her eyes wide as she took in her surroundings. The bridge was larger and more advanced than anything she had seen in the Concorde. Every station was crewed by a human. The technology was unmistakably human in design. "Welcome aboard," Victor said, extending his hand. "How does it feel?" Maria shook his hand firmly. "It feels like waking up from a very long sleep." Back in Concorde space, the effects of the human withdrawal were beginning to show. Minor problems started appearing everywhere. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades began to malfunction. Schedules that had run smoothly started falling apart. The aliens blamed each other at first. The Torvak accused the Valorians of sabotage. The Valorians blamed the Mendari for incompetence. The Mendari insisted that the fault lay with the Kelrani. Nobody thought to count how many humans had left, or to wonder why no new ones were arriving. On the agricultural world of Kelron Prime, the annual harvest was approaching. For generations, human farmers had managed the vast fields that fed half the Kelrani Empire. They had adapted earth crops to alien soil, developed irrigation systems for hostile climates, and trained local workers in techniques that had taken humanity thousands of years to perfect. Now those farmers were gone. The Kelrani workers who remained knew how to follow instructions, but they did not understand why the instructions worked. When problems arose, they had no solutions. An elder named Peter Walsh was one of the last human farmers on Kelron Prime. He had spent 60 years, turning barren wastelands into productive farmland. He had taught 3 generations of Kelrani how to work the soil. On his final day, he gathered his former students around him. "I have shown you everything I know," he told them. "The soil here is difficult, but it can be managed if you pay attention. Watch the weather. Check the water levels. Rotate your crops each season. You can do this without me." The Kelrani listened politely, but Peter could see they were not really paying attention. They had always assumed he would be there to fix their mistakes. They had never imagined a future where they would have to survive on their own. Peter boarded the last transport off Kelron Prime that evening. As the ship lifted off, he looked down at the fields he had created. He wondered how long they would last. The final phase of the Exodus happened quickly. In the span of 6 months, every human who wanted to leave did so. The authority provided transport for anyone who could not afford it. Communities were moved together so that families and friends would not be separated. It was the largest migration in the history of any species. On the day the last human transport departed Concorde space, Admiral Patricia Coleman broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Her face appeared on screens in every space station, every colony, every ship. "For 300 years, humanity has served this Concorde," she said. Her voice was calm, but firm. We have maintained your stations. We have healed your sick. We have grown your food. We have kept your peace. We asked for nothing but respect, and we received only contempt. She paused, letting her words sink in. We are leaving. We have built a new home for ourselves, far from your borders. Do not follow us. Do not contact us. You wanted to see what the galaxy would look like without humanity. Now you will find out. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, aliens stared at their screens in confusion. Some laughed, dismissing the message as human drama. Some shrugged and returned to their work. A few felt a chill of fear, though they did not yet understand why. In the new frontier, Patricia Coleman stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the stars of humanity's new home stretch out before her. Nathan Cole stood beside her in silence. Do you think they will learn? Nathan asked finally. Patricia shook her head slowly. Not yet. They will have to suffer first. They will have to understand what they have lost before they can appreciate what they had. She turned away from the window. But we will be ready when they do. Humanity had left the galaxy that had rejected them. Now they would wait and watch and build, and the galaxy would learn the true cost of taking. Humanity for granted. The first disaster happened 3 weeks after the humans left, on Torvac Station 12. An alarm began screaming in the middle of the night cycle. The atmospheric processors had failed. Without them, the station would run out of breathable air within 6 hours. Greth 9. The station supervisor, who had dismissed Kevin Marshall's departure without a second thought, rushed to the engineering section. He found his remaining technicians standing helplessly in front of control panels they did not understand. Fix it, Grethnine commanded. This is basic maintenance. Chief technician, a young Torvac, who had never worked without human guidance, stared at the screens with terror in his eyes. I do not know how, he admitted. The human always handled these systems. He tried to teach us, but we never thought we would need to learn. Grethnine grabbed a technical manual and began flipping through the pages. The words made no sense to him. Human engineers had written these manuals using concepts and methods that Torvac education had never included. They had assumed someone would always be there to explain. The air grew thin. People began to panic. Children cried as their parents held them close, not knowing what else to do. By the time an emergency team arrived from the Torvac homeworld, 3,000 people had died. The station was saved, but the damage was done. For the first time, the Torvac understood that the humans had not been servants. They had been the only thing keeping the station alive. On the Mendari homeworld, a plague began to spread. It started in the eastern provinces, in regions where human doctors had worked for generations. The disease was not new. It was a mutation of an illness that humans had been quietly suppressing for. Dax Dr. Samuel Grant had developed the treatment protocols before he left. He had written detailed instructions and trained local medical staff. But the instructions required careful attention to detail, and the local staff had never taken the training seriously. They had assumed Dr. Grant would always be there to correct their mistakes. Within weeks, the plague had spread to every major city. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Funeral services could not keep up with the dead. The Mendari government reached out to other species for help, but no one else had ever bothered to study Mendari biology. That had always been human work. The death toll climbed into the millions. Ambassador Keth Vor of the Valorian Empire stood before the Galactic Concord Council, demanding action. Where are the humans? She shouted, her scales flushing with anger. Why did no one stop them from leaving? Why were we not warned? The council chamber was silent. No one had answers. No one had been paying attention when the humans started to leave. No one had thought it mattered. We must find them, Keth Vor continued. We must bring them back. The galaxy is falling apart without them. The Kelrani representative spoke up. Our agricultural worlds are failing. The harvest on Kelron Prime was less than half of what we expected. We are facing famine for the first time in 1,000 years, the Torvac representative added. Our space stations require constant repairs. We do not have the expertise to maintain them. 12 more stations are showing critical failures. One by one, The representatives reported disasters. Trade routes were collapsing. Peace treaties were falling apart. Technologies that had worked perfectly for centuries were breaking down. The Concorde had been built on human labor, and no one had realized it until that labor was gone. On the edge of human space, Commander Gregory Price monitored the chaos from a hidden listening post. His job was simple: watch, record, and report. The human authority wanted to know exactly what was happening in the Concorde. Gregory had been skeptical of the Exodus at first. He had friends among the alien species. He had believed that with time and patience, things could improve. But watching the aftermath of humanity's departure changed his mind. "They never valued us at all," he said to his crew one evening. "They did not respect us as people. They did not even respect us as tools. We were just something they expected to always be there, like air or water." His communications officer, a woman named Sarah Webb, nodded in agreement. "They are sending messages constantly now, begging for help, offering trade deals. Some are even threatening war if we do not return." Gregory laughed bitterly. War. They cannot even keep their own stations running, and they want to threaten us with war. He sent his regular report to Admiral Coleman. The news was worse each time. The Concorde was destroying itself. Species that had been allies for millennia were turning on each other, fighting over resources that had become scarce without human management. In the new frontier, life was very different. Humanity was thriving in ways they had never been allowed to before. Maria Santos had been promoted to captain of her own vessel, the Defender. She commanded a crew of 200, all human, all treated with dignity and respect. For the first time in her career, she felt proud of the uniform she wore. Kevin Marshall had found work at a research station, developing new technologies that would benefit his own people. His expertise was valued. His ideas were heard. He had rebuilt his self-respect along with the machines he created. Dr. Samuel Grant and his wife Catherine had opened a hospital on one of the new colony worlds. They treated human patients with the same skill they had once offered to aliens who never appreciated it. The work was hard, but it was meaningful in a way it had never been before. Peter Walsh, the old farmer, had been given a plot of land on a world with perfect growing conditions. He spent his days teaching young humans the agricultural techniques he had perfected over 6 decades. His students actually listened, actually learned, actually thanked him. Across the new frontier, humans were building a civilization they could be proud of. Cities rose from empty plains. Ships launched from new shipyards. Children were born into a world where they would never be told they were inferior, but the shadow of the old galaxy still hung over them. Every day brought news of new disasters in the Concorde. Every day the calls for human help grew more desperate. Admiral Coleman gathered her senior staff for a strategy meeting. The holographic display showed a map of the Concorde, with red markers indicating major crises. There were so many markers that they almost covered the entire map. "The Valorians have attempted to enter our space 3 times this week," reported Admiral Reyes. "Border patrols turned them back without casualties. But they are getting bolder. The Mindari are offering trade concessions we would have killed 10 years ago," added Nathan Cole. "They want our doctors back. They say they will give us anything we ask." Patricia listened to the reports in silence. She had expected this. She had planned for this. But seeing the scale of the suffering still moved her. "What about the Torvac?" she asked. "They are dying," said Gregory Price, who had returned from his listening post for the meeting. "Their stations are failing one by one. They have lost contact with 3 outer colonies. They estimate they will lose half their population within the next decade if nothing changes." The room fell silent. Half a population. Billions of lives. "Some will say we should help them," Patricia said finally. "Some will say we have a moral obligation to prevent this suffering." She looked around the table at the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to humanity's survival. "But I remember what they did to us. I remember how they treated us when we begged for fair treatment. I remember being told that humans were not worth consideration." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars of humanity's new home. "We will not go back to being servants. We will not sacrifice ourselves for species that saw us as tools, to be used and discarded. If they want our help, they will have to earn it. They will have to prove they have truly changed. She turned back to face her staff. Until then, we watch, we wait, and we let them understand exactly what they lost when they took humanity for granted. The meeting ended, and the leaders of humanity returned to their work. In the Concord, civilizations continued to crumble. In the new frontier, humanity continued to grow stronger. The reckoning had only just begun. 5 years after the Exodus, the Galactic Concord no longer existed. The great alliance that had ruled 1,000 star systems had shattered into dozens of warring factions. Species that had once sat together on the council now fought bitter wars over scraps of territory. Ancient treaties meant nothing. Old friendships had turned to hatred. The galaxy had become a dark and dangerous place. Ambassador HFY stood on the bridge of her diplomatic vessel, watching the stars pass by. She was traveling to the border of human space, leading a delegation that represented the last hope of her people. 5 years ago, HFY had been one of the most powerful figures in the Concord. She had commanded respect from 100 species. She had shaped policies that affected billions of lives. She had looked down on humans as useful, but ultimately inferior creatures. Now her scales had faded from bright blue to sickly gray. Her people were dying. Her empire was crumbling, and she was going to beg the humans for help. The delegation arrived at the meeting point, an old space station on the edge of neutral territory. The station had been built by humans a century ago, then claimed by aliens who had pushed the original builders out. Now it was abandoned, its halls empty, systems running only because human engineers had designed them to last. Admiral Patricia Lester Coleman was waiting in the main conference room. She sat alone at a long table, her white hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp and clear despite her age. Behind her stood Commander Nathan Cole, Admiral Victor Reyes, and Captain Maria Santos. Along with a dozen other senior human officers, HFY entered the room and stopped. For a long moment, she simply looked at the humans who had once served her people. Then she walked slowly to the opposite end of the table and sat down. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the arrogance that had once defined it. Patricia nodded slightly but said nothing. HFY took a deep breath. "I have come to ask for your help. My people are dying. Our worlds are falling apart. We have tried everything we know, but nothing works. You are our only hope." Patricia studied the ambassador for a long moment. She remembered this woman from the old days. She remembered how HFY had blocked every proposal to improve human working conditions. She remembered how HFY had laughed at human requests for fair treatment. "For 300 years, Patricia said finally, we told you that we had value. We showed you every day, with every act of service, with every sacrifice we made. You did not fail to understand. You simply did not care. We care now," HFY said quickly. "We have learned. We have changed." Patricia shook her head slowly. "You have not changed. You have simply become desperate. There is a difference. Please." HFY's voice cracked. "Our children are dying. Our civilization is crumbling. You are the only ones who can save us." "You know," Patricia replied, "we have always known." That was the point. She stood up, and her officers moved to follow her toward the door. HFY remained seated, her head bowed. "Wait," the ambassador called out. "What do you want from us? What can we do to earn your help? We will give you anything. Territory, resources, political power. Name your price." Patricia paused at the door. 5 years ago, we would have accepted fair treatment as equals. We asked for nothing more than respect. You refused? Now the cost is much higher." She turned to face HFY one last time. "Go back to your people. Tell them that humanity is not coming to save them. Tell them that the consequences of their choices are theirs to bear. Perhaps in another 5 years, if any of you survive, we can discuss terms again." The human delegation left the station. HFY remained alone in the conference room, weeping silently. News of the failed meeting spread quickly through the former Concord. The reaction was mixed. Some species blamed humanity for being cruel and heartless. Others blamed themselves for creating this situation. A few began to wonder if the humans had been right all along. In the new frontier, the news sparked a fierce debate. A young diplomat named Christina Moore addressed the Human Assembly, the governing body of human civilization. "We left because they took us for granted," Christina said. She was 32 years old, part of a generation that had never experienced life under alien rule. "We left because they treated us with contempt, because they refused to see us as equals. We were right to leave. We were right to build something better." The assembly members nodded in agreement. Christina had spoken the truth that they all felt. "But now they are dying," Christina continued. "Millions have already perished. Millions more will follow. We have the power to help them. We have the knowledge and the resources to end their suffering. And we are choosing not to." The nodding stopped. The assembly grew quiet. "I understand why we are angry," Christina said. "I understand why we want them to suffer as we suffered. But refusing to help does not make us strong. It makes us exactly what they always accused us of being: cold, selfish, and uncaring." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had lived through decades of mistreatment. "We are better than that. We have always been better than that. That is why we survived. That is why we built this civilization. Not because we were cruel, but because we were compassionate. Not because we took revenge, but because we never gave up hope." Her words hung in the air. Some delegates looked uncomfortable. Others seemed thoughtful. "I am not saying we should go back to being servants," Christina concluded. "I am saying we should go back to being human. We should offer help, but on our terms. As equals, not as servants. As partners, not as tools. Let them see what we truly are when we are treated with respect." The assembly debated for 3 days. Opinions were divided. Some supported Christina's vision of engagement. Others argued that the aliens deserved whatever fate awaited them. A few suggested military conquest, taking advantage of the Concord's weakness to expand. Human territory. Admiral Coleman listened to all the arguments without commenting. She had spent 50 years planning the Exodus, and she had always known this moment would come. The question was never whether humanity would return to galactic affairs. The question was how. On the 4th day, she addressed the assembly herself. "I have spent my entire life fighting for humanity's survival," Patricia said. "I have made hard choices and accepted terrible costs. I do not regret the Exodus. It was necessary. It saved our people from slow extinction under alien contempt." She paused, gathering her thoughts. But survival was never the goal. Survival was only the beginning. The goal was always to build a future where humanity could thrive, where our children could grow up proud of who they are, where our species could take its rightful place among the stars. She looked at Christina Moore, who sat quietly in the front row. "This young woman is right. We are better than revenge. We are better than cruelty. We left the Concord because they refused to see our worth. If we refuse to help them now, we prove that we were never worthy of respect in the first place." The assembly voted the next day. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. Humanity would offer help to the dying civilizations of the former Concord. But this time, everything would be different. There would be no more servitude, no more contempt, no more taking humanity for granted. This time, humanity would return as equals, or not at all. 10 years after the Exodus, humanity returned to the stars. They did not come as servants. They did not come as conquerors. They came as something the galaxy had never seen before. Equals who chose to help. The negotiations had taken 2 years. Every surviving species sent representatives to meet with human diplomats. Every agreement was debated, every term was questioned, every word was examined carefully. Humanity would not be fooled again. Admiral Patricia Coleman, now 83 years old, oversaw the process personally. She insisted on being present for every major decision, even when her health began to fail. This was her life's work, and she would see it through to the end. "There will be no more Concord," she told the assembled representatives on the day the final treaties were signed. "That system failed because it was built on exploitation. One species used others as tools. The strong took from the weak. It was never sustainable. She stood with effort, leaning on a cane but refusing to sit. What we build now will be different. We will call it the Galactic Union. Every species will contribute according to their abilities. Every species will receive according to their needs. And no species will ever be taken for granted again. The representatives listened in silence. They had no choice. Their civilizations were dying, and humanity was their only hope. But more than that, they had finally learned to listen. Suffering had taught them lessons that centuries of human words could not. The Union was built slowly, carefully, with attention to every detail. Human administrators worked alongside alien counterparts, sharing knowledge rather than hoarding it. Human engineers trained alien technicians, making sure they understood the reasons behind each procedure. Human doctors established medical schools where alien students learned to heal their own people. Dr. Samuel Grant returned to the Mindari homeworld, but not as a servant. He came as a partner, working with local physicians to rebuild their shattered healthcare system. "You should have been doing this all along," Samuel told his new colleague, a Mindari doctor named Vethtal. "Your people are intelligent. Your scientists are capable. You simply never believed you needed to learn." Vethtal nodded sadly. "We thought you would always be there. We thought we could rely on you forever. We were wrong." They worked together for 3 years. Samuel taught everything he knew, and Vethtal proved to be a brilliant student. When the first vaccine, developed entirely by Mindari scientists, was successfully tested, both doctors celebrated together. "You saved us twice," Vethtal said. "Once when you healed our sick, and again when you taught us to heal ourselves." Samuel smiled. "I did not save you. I just showed you what you were capable of all along." Captain Maria Santos, now Admiral Santos, commanded the Joint Defense Fleet that protected Union space. Her crews were mixed, human and alien, serving together as equals. Her first officer was a Torvak named Krath 7. The son of someone who had died when Station 12 failed, they had discussed the past only once. Shortly after Krath 7 joined her crew, "My father used to say humans were beneath us," Krath 7 admitted. "He looked down on your species. He thought you existed only to serve our needs." Maria waited, not sure what to expect. "He was wrong," Krath 7 continued. "We were all wrong. You were never beneath us. You were carrying us the entire time. When you left, we fell because we had forgotten how to stand on our own." Maria nodded. "The past is the past. What matters now is what we build together." They had worked side by side ever since. Their fleet kept the peace in a galaxy that was slowly healing from decades of war. Their examples showed that cooperation between species was possible when both sides treated each other with respect. Kevin Marshall, the engineer who had once crawled through maintenance tunnels on Torvak Station 12, now led the team that redesigned those stations. He trained Torvak engineers in every system, every procedure, every shortcut he had learned over 20 years. He made sure they understood not just what to do, but why. "The most important thing I can teach you," he told his students, "is to never stop asking questions. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you start to fail." Peter Walsh, the old farmer, spent his final years establishing agricultural schools across the former Concord. He traveled from world to world, teaching species that had once mocked human farmers how to grow their own food. He died peacefully at the age of 94, surrounded by students from a dozen different species, all of whom called him teacher. On the 10th anniversary of the Exodus, Patricia Coleman gave her final public address. She stood on a stage in the capital city of the new frontier, looking out at a crowd that included humans and aliens standing together. 10 years ago, we left a galaxy that did not value us," she said. Her voice was weak but clear. "We could have stayed gone forever. We could have watched from afar as civilizations that had scorned us destroyed themselves. Some would say we had earned that right." She paused, looking at the diverse faces before her. "But that was never who we were. Humanity has always been defined not by what we take, but by what we give. We give our knowledge, our compassion, our determination to build something better. And now, finally, We give those gifts as equals." Tears streamed down her wrinkled face, but she was smiling. "They took humanity for granted, and they paid dearly when we left. But the lesson was never about punishment. It was about recognition. We know our worth now. The galaxy knows our worth, and together we will build something that lasts." The crowd erupted in applause. Human and alien voices rose together, celebrating a future that none of them could have imagined 10 years before. Patricia stepped back from the podium and was helped off the stage by Nathan Cole, who had remained by her side through everything. She died 3 months later, peacefully. Knowing that her work was complete, the Galactic Union thrived in the decades that followed. It was not perfect. There were conflicts and disagreements, setbacks and failures. But the foundation Patricia had built held strong. Every species contributed. Every species was valued. No one was taken for granted. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as servants, not as masters, but as partners in building a better future. They had proven that compassion was not weakness, that giving was not surrender, that the best revenge was simply becoming the people they had always known they could be, and the galaxy never forgot the lesson they had taught. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Some truths can only be understood through suffering. The species of the galaxy had learned that humanity was not a resource to be exploited. Humanity was a gift, and gifts must be received with gratitude and respect, or they will be taken away. The humans had been taken for granted once. It had cost the galaxy everything. It would never happen again.